graphing of sine function, y equals sine x minus pi over 4. The general equation for sine function is y equals a, the amplitude, times sine, open bracket, b, the periodic function, times x, minus c, the horizontal displacement of the function, close bracket, plus d, the vertical displacement or vertical translation of the function. The amplitude is what we need to find first. Which is what we define as modulus of a, which in this case a is 1 because there's 1 here. So a is 1, so the modulus of 1 is basically 1. We use modulus to just prove that we're just looking for the actual value. We don't want the vector value. The vector will be plus or minus 1. If it's minus 1 here, if it's minus, we put minus 1. Modulus of minus 1 is still 1. The next thing we need to do is to find the period. And the period is basically every sine function has a periodic function of 2 pi. So a sine function, if I have y equals to sine x, the graph starts from 0 and it goes all the way to 180 and it comes back to 360 at 0. So this is a graph of y equal to 0 there, the axis x-axis, and this is y, this is y-axis, and that's x equal to 0. So you can see it starts at 0 and finishes at 2 pi. That's one period. So that's what we're working out here, the period for our function. Now the period is, you can see this one is 2 pi. For every function, you always divide the period by b. So 2 pi divided by b, b in this case is 1, because that's sine x, that's why it's 2 pi. 2 pi divided by b is still 2 pi, because b is 1. In this case, here is, if you compare that to that, b is 1 as well, so it's going to be 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi. So that's our period, 2 pi. Now we need to work out the x scale. X scale is how we break the function. In this case, sine has four critical distance. The start, the maximum, 0, the minimum, back to 0. So it's got that distance, that's 1, second distance 2, third 3, and fourth. So it's got 4 distance. So we have to define our period by 4 in order to work out the scale. So we say 4. So we say 2 pi. So x scale is the period divided by 4. Every time you work on sine function or cosine function, you always divide for the x scale, you always divide 2 pi by 4. In this case, it's going to be pi over 2. That's 90 degrees. 180 degrees equals pi. So pi over 2 is 90 degrees. So that's the x scale. What that meant is you start from 0, you go to 90, then 90 plus another 90 is 180, and then 180 plus another 90 is 270, so that's 270. 270 plus another 90 is 360, and that's what that meant. We're going to start at, let's work out where to start our starting point. The starting point for x, y equals sine x, is 0, and you finish at 2 pi. The starting point for our function is going to be, you take the value here, what's in the bracket, and you set it to 0. So we say start and end from end. We need to know what the start is and the end. So that's the start, and that's the end. So at the start, just like here, we set that to 0. We set x to 0, that's the start. And we also set x to 2 pi. So that's the end. Here, we need to set x minus 4 pi to 0. So that'll be x minus pi over 4 to 0. X minus pi over 4 to 0. And then we have to set x minus pi over 4 to 2 pi. That's the end. Just like we set x to 0, x to 2 pi. Well, we haven't got x, we got x minus pi over 4. So we have to do x minus pi over 4 to 0, x minus pi over 4 to 2 pi. We do that for both sine and cosine functions. And in this case, x equals pi over 4. We add pi over 4 to both sides, or you move pi over 4 to the other side, that'll become plus pi over 4. Here, we add pi over 4 to both sides, or you move pi over 4 to the other side, you get x equals 2 pi over 1, that's over 1 by the way, plus pi over 4. Well, in this case, I need to multiply the bottom here by 4 and the top by 4 to make it same denominator. So I'll get 8 pi over 4 plus pi over 4. What that implies is 8 pi plus pi is 9 pi over 4. So that is the end of our graph. We start at pi over 4, we finish this at 9 pi over 4. What is pi over 4? Pi over 4 is 45 degrees. So the graph is being shifted along by 45 degrees. So 9 pi over 4 must be 360 degrees plus 45. So that'll be 405 degrees. Let's check that to see whether that makes sense. Well, what we need to do now here is start the calculator, turn on the calculator, and do 9 times 180, because pi is 180. You divide it by 4, so you get 405 degrees. So that makes sense. Right, so that's the finish, 405 degrees. Now we can start the graph. So this is it. The amplitude is 1. The d here, let's say plus d. D here is 0. That's plus 0. Because d is 0. That means the graph, it will start on the x-axis. Y equals to 0. If it wasn't 0, it would start on whatever that is. That means it will start on, if it's plus 1, it will start at plus 1. It will start, if it's minus 1, start minus 1. So let's draw this graph. Right, so now let's work out we've worked out the scale of the x scale, so it's 90 degrees difference, but we're starting at pi over 4. So if I just make this one here as pi over 4, that's where we're starting. Remember, pi over 4 is 45 degrees. Now the scale is plus 90. So I'm going to add 90 to pi over 4, because that's what that meant. The scale is saying, look, I start at 0, I add 90, right? Then 90. So that's what this is telling us. Start pi over 4, add 90. So let's make these 90 two big squares here. 90 is pi over 2. I could make 90 look like over 4, because if I multiply both top and denominator by 2, I get 2 pi over 4. So that makes up the adding up nicely. To add another 2 pi over 4, that will be 3 pi over 4. So that is 3 pi over 4. Well, if this is 45 degrees, 45 plus 90 is it's 135, isn't it? 135 degrees. You can see that's 3 pi over 4, because if you multiply 45 by 3, you get 135 degrees. And next along, we need to add another 2 pi over 4. Well, 2 pi over 4 plus 3 pi over 4 should be 5 pi over 4. And I can see that that will be 225 degrees, because if I times 45 by 5, I'll get 225 degrees. So that's what that is, 225 degrees. Now I need to add another 90 degrees there. Again, I'm adding 2 pi over 4, so I'm going to add 7, so that'll be 2 plus 5 is 7, so that'll be 7 pi over 4. 7 pi over 4. If you think about it, 7 pi over 4, that is basically 315 degrees, because what I've done is I've multiplied 45 by 7, so I get 315 degrees. So then the final one, because I started there, I have to add 4 lines, you see, start 1, 2, 3, 4. We can start 1, 2, 3, 4. So the fourth line is going to be add another pi over 4, which is that one now. So it's going to be that one here. So that will be 9, because 2 plus 7 is 9. So that will be 9 pi over 4. And that's 405 degrees. So that's our finish, which we work out. So that's the start, that's our finish. That's the start here, pi over 4, that's it. Now we need to work to the negative side as well. Don't forget that the graph D is 0. So we're not going to raise the graph, translate it up or down. It's going to be at the line where y equals to 0 here, and that's the x-axis. We haven't drawn the y-axis yet, so we'll do that in a minute. So let's go to the left, adding minus 90, going to be minus pi over 4. Then minus pi over 4 with minus 2 pi over 4, because we're adding negative now. So it's going to be minus 3 pi over 4. Then minus 3 pi over 4 plus another minus 2 pi over 4 is minus 5 pi over 4. And then with that one again will be minus 7 pi over 4. Okay, so we've done that. So where is the y-axis then? So the y-axis is between minus pi over 4 and plus 5 pi over 4. So we know that it's going to be here. That's your y-axis. So if I draw that, always use pencil to draw your graph. Do not use pen. And in case you make mistake, you can't rub it off. With a pencil, always use pencil because you can rub a pencil off. Now the graph goes all the way to 1 because amplitude is 1. So if I make that 1, so that's 1. And this will be, here will be minus 1. It's that pi over 4 and it goes all the way to 1 here. So that's what's happening. It goes all the way to 1. Gets back to, start at pi over 4, go all the way to 1, get back to 0. So what we need to do is just do that. Right? And then that's the first 90 from pi over 4. And it gets down to 0. Right? And then it goes down to minus 1 here. So it goes down to minus 1. And then it gets back to 0. That's the first period. In the second period, we go back down to minus 1 here. So it will be minus 1 there. And then it gets back to 0. And then it goes back to 1. And then it gets back to 0. So that's the sine graph there. And don't forget, this is your y, which sometimes is written as function of x, or you might have function of theta, which this is theta, or it could be x. And your max amplitude is this height here from the origin, from the y equals to 0 in this case to there is the amplitude. This is the maximum or crest, and this is the trough or minimum. So remember, you need to find your amplitude first. So find your amplitude, then you need to find your period. For sine or cosine, the period is always 2 pi over b. So that's the formula for period. 2 pi over b. And for scale, the x scale is always period over 4. For sine and cosine function, it's always period. Whatever you get for your period, you divide it by 4, you get, that gives you how far you should go every time. So you start there, you go 90, that's what this tells us. You go 90, then 90, then 90, then 90. And that's how you sketch your graph. Always include your start and your end, and then that helps you to gauge your graphing of sine function.